The movement of mail throughout the country is a fascinating part of our nation's postal history. Before the invention of automobiles and other horseless vehicles, the overland long distance movement of mail was typically done by the railroads. By the turn of the century, the invention of the automobile and other self powered road vehicles began to change the fabric of our society. The automobile facilitated large population movements out of cities and into more rural areas. As dirt roads gave way to paved highways in the 1930s and 40s, alternatives to railroad mail services became feasible. This presentation provides information on the history, development, and implementation of the Highway Post Office program. In early July 1838, before the United States issued any stamps, Congress authorized the use of railroad technology to transport mail. Mail carried by the railroad from this period can often be identified by an RR postmark, which designates either the railroad or the route agent location, as seen here on this cover. This 1848 cover was placed on the railroad route 401, Portsmouth to Boston, which was operated by Eastern Railroad. The cancel is the route agent's stamp, Eastern Railroad. By 1862, the railway post office had been established. This new technology combined with transporting the mail with actually processing and sorting it while it was in transit. The first RPO route was between Chicago and Clinton, Iowa. By 1869, an official agency, the Railroad Mail Service, RMS, was created to oversee the movement and handling of mail aboard trains. The effectiveness of the railroad post office technology was its ability to touch virtually every town in America. The coordinated routing and expedited service provided by passenger trains also supported mail quickly reaching its intended destinations. Inside of this early RPO car was designed by Charles Harrison. The interior featured hinged metal railings that could hold mail bags within easy reach. Additionally, it also had tables and overhead bins to easily sort and cancel mail while en route. When a train arrived at either connection or termination station, the mail was already organized into pouches and without the need of further sorting. This era marked the beginning of the use of the RPO cancellation. Shown here is an 1886 Sioux City and Yankton RPO Dakota Territorial postmark and cancel tying a 2-cent stamp to the cover with a printed corner card of a Yankton merchant. As the RPO service evolved, it drove the development of other new technologies, including the mail hook. Located right next to the door, mail hooks caught a bag of hanging mail as it passed by the station. This saved significant amounts of time by not requiring the train to stop. Shown here was a modified version of a mail hook called the HUP Automatic Rail Service. This device allowed for high-speed pickup of multiple mail bags and automatically transferred the mail bag into the RPO car. After World War I and by 1920, America is once again being drastically transformed. This time, the automobile was creating the greatest revolution in American life ever caused by technology. Now within reach of many families, motor vehicles allowed Americans to be more mobile. But this new technology also had a negative impact on the railroad. Since many Americans were now free to travel at will, railroad passenger travel fell off sharply. Railroads began closing down unprofitable routes, and this ultimately had a negative impact on the RPO mail stream. As simple paved roads became high-speed highways in the 1930s and 40s, alternative to railroad mail services became even more feasible. By the mid-1930s, post office officials saw motor vehicles as a viable replacement for the railroad service. Working with Congress, postal officials began formulating plans using motor vehicles to replace the loss of railroad coverage. Ultimately, the plan became reality when Congress passed Public Law 740 and President Roosevelt signed into law the Highway Post Office Service on July 11, 1940. Due to pressure brought by the railroad special interests, the law also included wording which disallowed highway post office services in any area which already had adequate railroad service. The specifications required that the highway post office vehicles be equipped in similar fashion as the previously successful railroad post office cars. On August 17, 1940, the Postmaster General created a committee to look into how to implement the transportation of mails on motor vehicle routes. The committee was tasked to develop a feasibility study with recommended routes, vehicles, and schedules. It was decided to establish a pilot trial program as a small-scale test of the methods and equipment to be used in the full program. The committee asked for input from 15 RMS division superintendents regarding 3 possible routes to be used in the pilot trial. Almost 200 routes were submitted for consideration. That so many areas were in need of this new service reflects the scope of the shrinking railroad coverage. An important part of the committee's recommendation was to review the different vehicles proposed for consideration. The committee evaluated criteria like engine types, security arrangements, gross weight, maintenance requirements, and overall operating costs. They narrowed down the selection to 3 choices and authorized their purchase for the pilot program. One of the vehicles purchased for the pilot program was this customized 1940 Mack International bus. This bus proved effective but was ultimately rejected due to cost. This International Harvester tractor-trailer combination was also included in the pilot trial. Powered by a diesel engine, the cab-over-engine design did not support communications between the postal clerks and the driver. While it logged some significant mechanical issues, postal officials were more concerned with the driving characteristics of this rig. Given the need to navigate loading docks and other tight corners, jackknifing was considered an issue with this particular tractor-trailer combination. Because of all these reasons, the post office dropped consideration of a tractor-trailer combination and instead concentrated on the bus configuration. The committee also authorized the purchase of this 1941 white model 788 bus. This vehicle met all the requirements and ultimately became the preferred solution. The white model 788 was 35 feet in length and typically carried 2 postal clerks and a driver. There was an external mail slot for accepting letters from postal patrons. The white 788 was powered by a 12-cylinder 210 horsepower engine, and even though predominantly made from aluminum, this bus got only around 5 miles to the gallon. Designed after the successful RPO car, the interior of post office buses contained a sorting table, pigeonholed cabinets, and mailbag racks towards the front. The rear section contained a small bathroom and a general storage area with a capacity of about 150 mailbags. Fresh air could be blown into the bus to keep it cool while moving, but there was no air conditioning. A heating system provided warmth during the winter months. Here are 2 postal workers sorting mail inside a highway post office. The configuration of the interior almost perfectly matched that of the earlier railroad post office cars. The 3 pilot vehicles all had the bathroom pictured above. The door at right is a simple curtain. But after the pilot program, and as the post office department began to purchase additional vehicles, the bathrooms were removed in favor of additional mailbag storage. Whether this was done as a cost savings measure or if there are some other reasons is not known. The committee was also responsible for selecting the first three 1941 experimental routes from the 200 routes submitted for consideration. There were a number of criteria used for route selection, including the need to be based where the federal government already operated a motor vehicle garage, and the route could not have any grades that exceeded 6%. Additionally, the routes had to be reasonably free from severe climate conditions, such as being located in a snow belt. Given these requirements, the three pilot program routes chosen were Washington, D.C. to Harrisburg, Virginia, February 10th, South Bend to Indianapolis, Indiana, May 3rd, and San Francisco to Pacific Grove, California, August 4th. There is speculation that the choosing of these routes may have been politically influenced. Here is a 1950 road map showing the inaugural Washington, D.C. to Harrisburg, Virginia route. Each stop is shown in green. Given its railroad heritage and close ties with RMS service, the HPO schedule was highly defined and adhered to. Typical stops only lasted a few minutes. Most routes consisted of two trips, one in each direction. Trips were usually done on the same day, although some routes required the trips to be done over 2 days. To demonstrate the effectiveness of the HPO program, this Washington, D.C. to Harrisburg, Virginia route serviced over 125,000 residents. Not all post offices were adjacent or even close to the HPO route. In these situations, a connecting vehicle would meet the HPO bus. Started in the RPO era, these star routes transferred mail in closed pouches to the post offices located away from the railroad terminals. This practice continued with the new HPO service. Here is a star route mail truck being loaded in the inaugural Washington to Harrisburg trip. The inaugural Washington to Harrisburg route was widely publicized in both the philatelic and national press. Washington politicians, never ones to miss an opportunity for self-promotion, took advantage of the publicity that this exciting new technology offered. In this publicity photo, we see FDR, not wanting his stamp collection to be incomplete, depositing a cover in the HPO bus mail slot for a first trip cancellation. Here are some HPO facts and figures. The HPO service ran from 1941 through 1974. Most routes were around 150 miles in length. Only philatelic mail was carried on first trips, and there was a total of 410 routes. Shown here is the distribution of new HPO routes added over time. After the introduction in 1941, no new routes were added during the war years, but by 1948, the Postal Service began adding additional routes that covered all the states. Still operating under the original legislation and watchful eye of the powerful railroad special interest groups, the Postal Service only added HPO routes if it did not compete with the existing railroad routes. By the 1960s, several new technologies began to once again revolutionize the United States mail stream. The adoption of the zip code system and new sorting technologies ultimately drove the post office to change the way it distributed and processed America's mail. On October 20, 1960, the Post Office Department placed into service a new mail processing facility at Providence, Rhode Island, and widely promoted it as the first automated post office in the United States. The 13-acre facility incorporated the first automatic high-speed sorting, facing, and canceling machines, as well as 3 miles of conveyor belts that move mail between processing areas within the plant and the loading docks for transportation. In conjunction with the introduction of zip codes, this automation would drive sweeping changes to the way mail moved throughout our country. Here is a 1964 photo of the new multi-position letter sorting machine. The machine moved letters into position in front of one of the operators. The operator typed the destination town or city zip code, and the machine would automatically send the letter to join others headed for the same destination while the next letter takes its place. Postal workers using these machines could sort up to 30,000 letters an hour. Highly successful, the post office began implementing these with high-speed sorting machines in the newly established sectional centers across the United States. This new distribution approach effectively made the RPOs, HPOs obsolete. HPO covers are a fascinating part of United States postal history. Some HPO covers are very rare with less than a handful known, yet because there is currently little demand, this can be a challenging area of collecting that is still quite affordable. And unlike FDCs, these covers were not mass produced and marketed as investments. The scope of HPO covers is reasonably manageable. A complete first trip cover collection would comprise of about 950 covers. Here is a first trip cover from the inaugural Washington, D.C. to Harrisonburg, Virginia route. Routes typically comprised of two trips, one in each direction, but there are a few routes with multiple trips. The cancel shown here is 4 inches with 3 mm bars. Note that it calls out the trip number. For this inaugural route, the Trip 1 cancel was used for a Washington to Harrisonburg leg. Some first trip covers also carry receiving post office back cancels. The Trip 2 cancel was used for the return Harrisonburg to Washington leg. The cancel is identical to Trip 1 except for the trip number. But note that the post office occasionally numbered trips based upon the older RPO trip numbers. So not every HPO route used Trip 1 and 2. Shown here are two first trip cancels for Route 194, Pasco to Yakima, Washington. While they are marked trips 63 and 64, these are indeed first trips. There are not 62 previous HPO trip covers. While first trip covers are a popular collecting area, some folks also collect last trip covers. Here's an example of a last trip philatelic cover with a cachet. While first trips always carried philatelic mail, it is unclear if last trips always followed this practice. Last trip covers often do not carry cachets and require examination of the date stamp to determine if they are truly last trip covers. Since postal officials knew a route would be closing, the alternate mail stream was typically established before the last HPO trip was made, and mail volume could be very light. This particular cover from my collection is Route 138B, Tupelo to Jackson, Mississippi. Only 10 to 12 covers are thought to have been on this trip. It is unknown how many have survived. A specialized area of HPO cover collecting are commercial covers. Commercial HPO covers are those which were carried during normal operations and are not philatelic in nature. Since they were not typically collected or saved, they are less common than first trip covers and often command a premium. For collectors who want a really challenging area of HPO ephemera, the image here shows two unusual items. The top two items are facing slips. These slips were placed on the top of sorted letters and show the destination post office and dispatching unit and clerk name. On the bottom is a pouch label, also known as a pouch slider. These were inserted into the mail pouch label holder and also included dispatch information. There previously was only one HPO catalog for collectors, and it does not assign catalog numbers for each route trip. It is published by the Mobile Post Office Society. To address the lack of a numbering system for every trip, I have developed a free HPO catalog, which is organized and numbered in chronological order. You can download the catalog in PDF format for printing on the Stamp Smarter website. The printed catalog includes illustrated cancel, catalog number, route name, mileage, trip number, dates, cities, states, and value. There is also an additional HPO downloadable checklist, which allows you to track which HPO covers you have and might still need. There is also a free online catalog which contains more features and details than the printed version. It has a powerful search and filter capabilities and is fully illustrated with over 5,600 high-resolution images of the cancels, full covers, and route maps. The online catalog includes additional route details such as cover quantity, postmaster names, clerk names, drivers' names, division numbers, district numbers, and coach manufacturer name. One of the next technology steps in vehicle mail delivery is currently in another trial. The truck shown here is being tested on a single route by the Postal Service. No one is sorting and processing mail inside. In fact, no one is even driving this truck. Starting last month, this driverless truck is moving mail between Phoenix and Dallas. Technology and change often makes us uneasy, but this is just postal history repeating itself.